Hello, hello, hey, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, everybody out there who's starting to join us. Welcome to the Erudition interactive Black History session that we do on Thursdays. We are back this week. We were gone last week. As we were commemorating Juneteenth, and I had done some other episodes for other shows leading up to that. So we thought it was a good time to take a break and recharge the battery. But back today, here to discuss some history. I want to hesitate just for a moment. Let's see other people get on here as everybody tries to get on and catch on. And I hope everybody took the opportunity during Juneteenth to educate themselves on the newly adopted holiday, and that they went and also watched the episodes that we did throughout the day on Juneteenth on the Erudition Network. I appreciate my wife, my two older sons got on, and we did 15 minutes episodes to talk about the transit of the slaves and why there were so many in Texas, the significance or the relevance of Juneteenth, and then what happened immediately following. So if you have not watched those episodes, I encourage you to take the opportunity to do that, to learn a little bit of history that maybe you did not know. That is the one thing that we try very hard to do with Erudition. We try to provide you with history and give you things that maybe aren't necessarily covered in our history books. Today, I really would like today, as I would every session, to be an interactive session. I really want all of you all out there, hey, let me know that you're here, and comment whatever touches you about our history or about our current situation. Today, I didn't really know what I really wanted to talk about. All day, there's so many issues and so many things that we don't necessarily cover or aren't covered in Black history. And I wanted us to take the opportunity today to get on and kind of talk about some of those things. For me, I'm going to start the conversation on my end as a host to tell you that we are in a troubled time when it comes down to Black history, particularly. As many of you have seen, there are attempts to sidetrack us from learning history. The biggest thing in the news right now is critical race theory. And I think about an episode or two before, I said, I had been pulled into this argument on critical race theory. And I did, the other day, I was on the Man Up show with Michael and Phil, and we were, Mike and Phil, and we kind of talked about it a little bit. My issues with critical race theory have nothing to do with the truthfulness of it, but the fact that they named it a theory. Now, I know why, and I understand the lexicon of psychologists and lawyers and why you call something a theory. But the truth is, Black people live through this, and we have lived through this for centuries. We have been told that we provide no value. I remember having a conversation with my wife's uncle, and him telling me one time that when he was in school, and this is a very educated man, that a teacher told him that Africa was the dark continent. And when he inquired, well, why do they call it the dark continent? He was like, well, because nothing comes from there. To be told that as a Black person, to be told it as a Black man, that nothing comes from your history, it has an effect on you. It does something to you. And so when he told me that story, I said, I'm not surprised, but it again goes along with the idea that we have provided nothing, which most of us know to be ludicrous. We know that that in fact is a very ludicrous assumption to make, given the amount of inventors, doctors, thinkers, academics that we have provided to this country for the better part of 400 years. I'm talking about even before the founding in the beginning of America. Now, what we try to do here on Erudition is we try to take the time to go in and look at that history. And I think we've done a good job over the last few months, the last 2 months, and giving you a lot of information that maybe you didn't know. Maybe you didn't know. But I'm going to demonstrate to you today. You know, my kids, a lot of times, you know, when with us, because my kids are homeschooled, and thank God that we get an opportunity to kind of look at what they're learning and what they're seeing in their history books. And so when we started these sessions, I asked people when they came on, please, 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 when you come on with your kids, have them bring their history books, right? And let's look at this together. Well, the other day, I was going through an older history book, one of the history books that my older son is now out of school, or I wouldn't say out of school, out of elementary and high school. And I was looking at one of these books, and I was like, wait a minute, we had just spent about two weeks talking about massacres, talking about racial issues that had happened around 1900 to about 1920, let's say 1930, right? Just before the 30s. And it was frightening to me because as I was looking through his book, there was a part of it that, and I'm pulling it up right now, if you know what I'm doing, that said, they talked about Ida B. Wells. Now, I spent an episode speaking very heavily on Ida B. Wells and her crusade to demonstrate and to showcase how the lynching of Black people. She was a courageous woman. But in their history books, in their actual history books, and I'm going to read you just the first paragraph and a half, but I want you to listen to this and see what our kids are learning. So they actually mention Ida B. Wells, which is good. But one of the things they said, some people were murdering other people. Yes, it was murder. And nearly everyone, and that means the president, Congress, state leader, and most ordinary people, was looking the other way. They didn't want to face what happened. But Ida B. Wells was a newspaper woman, and she had no intention of looking aside. So she wrote about the murders, which were called lynchings. What happened to Wells? Her newspapers printing press was smashed. People said they would kill her, and they meant it. She moved, bought a gun, and kept writing. That's the history that they gave Ida B. Wells. I don't want to laugh, but what happens is that when we actually talk about someone who is meaningful, vital to Black history, what often happens is we get these types of explanations. At the beginning of that, if you heard what I said, it said some people were murdering other people. Who was murdering other people? And who were the other people? Never in there do they state to you that racist whites, sorry about that elephant in the background, that racist whites were killing free blacks. That was just some people. It almost sounds like what we hear in politics when you hear people say, well, some people have told me. Who are these people? You could go further. I was looking at, they talked about Jim Crow. They said Jim Crow wasn't real. He was the name of a character in a song about a black man who sang and danced and never gave anyone any trouble. Okay. And they go into a full-on paragraph. Yes, full-on paragraph about the song. And only briefly touch on the fact what Jim Crow actually was. Only briefly touch on the fact that the black codes in Jim Crow denied blacks rights. Never in there do they touch on the fact that after Reconstruction, laws, quite literally laws, were written to suggest separate but equal when we were not equal. Never do they talk about the fact that the Supreme Court of the United States went on to say that we were not equal to white people. This is well after Dred Scott. This is well after that famous case. When you look at cases like Plessy versus Ferguson, or you look at, which is not mentioned in here, we have to understand that there was an attempt to rewrite. Now, why is that important today? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we're dealing with that still today. We're having this problem today. See, they could dress it up and call it whatever it may be. You could call it critical race theory. You can call it systemic racism. You can call it whatever you want to call it, or categorize it whatever way you want to categorize it. But at the heart of it, it is the desire to keep Americans, and I didn't say blacks, Americans, blind and deaf to what is going on. It is an attempt to keep the status quo. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, but it's a true story. And for those of you who watch this, hold on a moment. Hey, Pastor Reza, I didn't know you were on here. As long as we accept it, the attempt to rewrite it is successful. I agree. And sadly, there are many who are accepting it. I thought about today playing the young man who many of you may have seen, who stood up in front of a room full of white people arguing and hollering about critical race theory, bragging about his doctorate and bragging about his education and who he is and what he earned and what he got. And it made me think. It made me remember something. And I often do that. It made me think about Booker T. Washington. Now, many of you know Booker T. Washington as the founder of the Tuskegee Institute, which was a normal school. In other words, it was a school that was designed, and people often forget this part about Tuskegee. It was a school that was designed to teach blacks to later go teach communities. We often leave that out. They taught them the pedagogy. They taught them how to be teachers to go in and teach others. But when I saw that brother the other day hollering and screaming like that and said what he got, I thought about Booker T. Washington, because for all of the things that Booker T. Washington did, he did establish schools. He did open up doors of opportunity for Black people. But Booker T. Washington never wanted to press the issue of social justice, civil rights. As a matter of fact, when Dr. W.B. Du Bois challenged him and others challenged him, right? William Trotter, they challenged him, right? And said, hey, we need to also get education that is outside of a shoe shine man, right? That is outside of a sharecropper, that is outside of a butcher, a farmer. We need to be opening our minds, right? And Booker T. Washington's response to that in the Atlanta Compromise was that it would be better that Black people forgot about all of that. Stop focusing on the ideas of social justice and equalness in that way, and submit yourself to white political rule. Submit yourself to basic education, because if you did that and took on jobs that could serve white establishments or white people, then they would eventually accept you as being able to live in society as a viable individual. So why did that brother come to my mind? Was because I started to think, bro, you're sitting here talking about critical race theory. One, you never read it. You don't know what it is. Secondarily, what you're doing also is you're telling people, because I got what I got, everything that happened in my past, everything that happened to my ancestors, everything that happened to this country is not of interest. Don't look at that. And I understand that you're standing on the shoulders of men and women who gave their lives so you could have those degrees, that education, that opportunity. Pastor Ray said, I'm going to get the rudiments of critical race theory and teach a couple of lessons to raise awareness at our church. I do think that we need to do that. I think we need to do that, because what we're seeing is that they want to keep us like they kept the slaves, ignorant, blind, and stupid. My son said, history at high school and elementary level is often taught individually. They don't really tell you how one event led to another. And we do talk about that in our home. I tell people, follow a path. Follow a path. Follow a subject that will lead you to a path. Ida B. Wells, who was she? What did she write about? Who are the people that she wrote about? That opens up many paths. You go and then you start to learn about her connection, as I said, I think I said in one episode before, to the People's Grocery. Her connection to many of these riots and lynchings, because she went down to go investigate it. Then she becomes more than just the name on a project in Chicago. She becomes something of a person to you, a freedom fighter to you, an ancestor who sacrificed so that you can have this knowledge that is often hidden from you. I said a moment ago that I was going to go and I was going to give you a little bit of a story. Let me tell you a story. This man went and took a job, Black man. He had multi levels of education, and he went to go take a job in a very prestigious company. The company recruited him because of all of his experience and his knowledge. And he went in the first year amongst about 10 other people to go work in this highly prestigious company. He was the only Black person that was hired, though. And as he started to work on this team over the year, he was making more money. So he went out and he bought a house, got a car, started buying better clothes for him, his wife, and his 2 children. And over that 2-year period, he started to rise in his investment and his property and he was doing very well. But then they changed his manager. His first manager worked with him. She helped him in the end processing. The new manager started to approach him and critique his time. Started to ask him, well, when are you coming to work? How many hours are you working during the day? The man thought that was a little funny. I never had a problem with that. I work, I get all my assignments done. As a matter of fact, I'm actually beating everybody else out and getting my assignments done. Because as Black people, we always think that we have to work 15, 20 times higher or harder, 50 to 100 times harder than whites. But the manager said, that's fine, but sometimes you're not here. He said, well, when I'm not here? So there have been many times you've called in, you weren't in. You say, well, I have children who are ill. They have chronic ailments, and sometimes I do have to be gone because it's only me and my wife. Manager smiled and went on about her way. He kept working. His mid-year, where they evaluate what he's done for that year, he had been an outstanding performer, looked at it, and she had put down that he, in fact, was underperforming. He said, well, wait a minute. I have all of these taskers done. I've been doing all this. I've actually been training new people because I'm catching on to the information faster than they are. And she said, well, because company policy, company standards say that you can't be gone more than so many hours out of a day if you leave. A company policy says that you need to let us know every time you're going to be out. And the man said, wait a minute. The rest of my team is always gone. And you never, ever, I've never seen anybody say this. The woman said, well, that's the policy of the company. So the man changed his time. She also asked him to send in when he got in and when he left. So he did that. This went on for about another year. Stress, strain, and heartache. At the end of that first year, the man did not get a raise. The second year, he did not get a raise. He was ready to leave the company. He approached the HR and said, what is going on? Why is my manager using company policy or whatever to harass me, pull me in the offices and curse me out? HR said, well, no, she's just following company policy. And this went on and on until the man erupted one day, cursed out everyone in the team, and quit. He quit a job that was affluent and better for his family to go take a job that provided less money. And he did not sue. He did not do anything. Now, that story is a standard story. And it's a truthful story. I know at least 3 people it has affected. I myself have lived some parts of that. We are in a point in this country where we have to talk about these issues. They pulled me into critical race theory. So I'm going to tell you what it is, what it means to me. Critical race theory is no more than another thing to talk about the systemic problems in this country. We have companies who use their policies and procedures to get Black people out of high-end jobs. We know that people are not being promoted even though they're working more hours and doing more and are more educated. Our women are telling us this. Our men are telling us this. Critical race theory was designed, was created and thought of by lawyers to understand how they use the legal ability of the system to hold you back. Many people who will watch this broadcast will sit there and say, wait a minute, I lived through some of that. It doesn't matter what job you're working. If the policy is implicitly biased, if the people are allowed to do you a certain way because you happen to be the only minority on the team. And they get away with it. And it happens and it happens and it happens. It becomes detrimental to all of us. Because how does a man or woman come home after dealing with situations like that? After being denied opportunity? After being told that they're less than? And my other favorite, we expect more from you. A passive, aggressive way of demeaning you, of holding you back. And we fight and fight and fight and fight and fight and fight. So now we say, wait a minute, we got to go into this theory. We got to go into this. We got to understand, what is the difference here? Why am I being treated differently? And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to touch on something with you tonight. Historically, the reason why that happens is because the systems that have been designed in this country for both white, black, whatever, we work on a stratified system. A stratified system. The idea of race itself is an illusion. It's a myth. And what happens is the myth was created to stratify us. White people here. Maybe I put a black person there. Maybe I'll put a Latino here. And we all fight to find out where we can get to, what level we can jump to. If you've worked any time in this life, historically, you will find, and I'm going to get into another part of this, you will find a liberal way of thinking. Yes, I will say liberal because that is the way, that's what it is. Where people have said, because I'm not racist, I'm not biased, I'm a liberal thinking person. And I'm going to give you an example of that. You go into an evaluation and you're sitting there and one of your liberal bosses, he's a friend of yours, really cool guy, always good, right? But when you walk in there and they're evaluating, he says, let me ask you a question. How many hours did you work this week? Say, I worked the whole week. You should know that. Well, I just want to ask that because, I noticed that there was some work that was done late. So I didn't know if you were here or not. I worked 20 years in the Navy. I had many arguments with several different chiefs who would always point out to me the brown, the colored, right? The people of color who were late. It never occurred to them, hey, they got a child. Hey, that was going on. This is whatever. And then I would have I can't put it any better way. I'd have a white sailor who nobody ever asked about. Matter of fact, I had an actual incident where I had to say, Chief, where is such and such? Oh, yeah, he told me yesterday he wasn't going to be here. Well, he don't tell you because he ain't necessarily directly working for you. He didn't come in. But that was okay. But I got a guy that's running late because his wife is ill and you want me to write him up. You want me to cuss him out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we need this critical race theory. Kendra said, and we have been indoctrinated in that system and become a part. Yes, preach. We have people who work in these systems now. Because as I often say, race is not, the supremacy of race, I should say, is not based on color. You could be self-hating and be the darkest, blackest person in this, by their standard, in this world, and still put out vitriol and hate on your own people, lead people down the wrong path. This lesson tonight is historic in the fact that it comes from a place. And when we see congressmen and governors and teachers and people fighting it, I'm going to get back to Booker T. Washington, since this is a history program. When Booker T. Washington built Tuskegee, he had the support of church members, community leaders, rich philanthropists, white philanthropists. And why is that? Because he had sat there and said, we are fine with the status quo, with being less than, with being undervalued, with being secondary. And when we walk into a job with education, with foreknowledge, with wisdom, with experience, and we are pushed out of that job because we used to call it the good old boy system, because of the idea that we're something else. That example of that manager asking, well, you know, why you didn't get stuff done? Why were you here those hours? Because see, the stories that are told about Black people are that we're lazy. We tell these stories ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. We never on time. We lie. We mean, right? We're constantly trying to find some way to get over. Where does those stories come from? They come from slavery. They come from the idea. During Juneteenth, I told people that the General Order 3 said, don't be idle, hanging around doing nothing. The lazy Black person is a part of an Americanized myth that has been pushed on us. And I'm going to say something else to you tonight. Some of y'all going to get mad. Some of us have accepted it. We live it. We hurt our own because of it. We tell ourselves, I can't do no better. The reason why we talk about the system is so you understand that it exists and you learn to detach yourself from it so you can grow out of it. When they revision our history, I read to you earlier where they said some people kill people. When they teach our kids a revisionist history and they don't teach them the truth, and they do that from kindergarten all the way into college now. And when I get on here to do erudition, or when I if I teach a lesson or if I'm talking to somebody, I always stress the fact, this ain't about guilt. What you guilty for? I told a young white man once, I said, he got in his feelings. Well, I don't like talking about it because that wasn't me. I didn't lynch nobody. I didn't slave nobody. I said, what you getting so upset about? He said, because I hate that they always putting that on me. Stop. What you guilty about? What did you do? Nothing. Then what you mad about? And then as we got into it, we found out what he was mad about was his privilege. He was like, it's not my fault that they don't stop me if I'm speeding. I said, I didn't say it was your fault, but you know what happens. You just admitted that you know what happens. I used to tell my family, we'd walk out of Walmart and there'd be people who would walk out in front of us, white people, and the alarm would go off. They wouldn't stop. They just keep on going. We stopped, pulled out our receipt. Sir, man, we're fine. And while they're checking us, we got in the car, and me and my wife, my kids were talking about, you know what? Those people stole something probably. But because of their privilege, nobody called the police. Nobody screamed, hey, sir, stop. But the Black people, because we always accused, we stopped. Even though we had spent money in the store. We all fall into this situation because of the way society has been conditioned with this system, because of our historical understanding of ourselves that has been warped. Kendra said, it is so frustrating to see our people with all these gifts and they have a defeated mindset. Yes, every day I see it. And this is why we need to be teaching, talking, reaching our children. You cannot save everybody. I remember my prophetess, Dr. Hattie B. Jones, told me, you can't save everybody. But there's somebody who is listening, somebody to touch. I get choked up when I think about her because without her, I would not have worked through the things I had to work through as a young man. And that's why it's so important to teach. Jenny says stereotypes, and yes, we accept them. Some embrace them, and some use it to identify themselves. Yes, preach. You're not a dog. You're not a trollop. You're none of these things until you say it to yourself. Until you tell the storytelling, the counter storytelling, you name your own reality and you claim it. And as a result, everybody suffers from this false reality that you're creating. Karen said we have to have uncomfortable conversations. It's hard. And that's what, like tonight, I promise you all, I didn't know exactly how I was going to approach this. It's uncomfortable to call it what it is, but we got to do it. Regina said, yes, we stopped knowing. We just paid for the things. Yeah. It's just like Baba Dick Gregory said, when a policeman pulls up behind a black person's car, we grip that wheel, even though we know we're not speeding, even though we know we ain't broke the law. When we're walking through a neighborhood and they stop us, and then how dare us get upset to say, why are you stopping me? I live here. I pay taxes here. But this is the society that we are living in. And as you all see these fights for critical race theory, for systemic racism, as you see these young people and older people leading them and saying, we all got to get involved in that. We all have to say something to people. Hey, look, let me explain to you what that means. Because, see, they taught our kids in these history books. They taught our kids that there's just someone, some people, right, who were getting killed, who were getting murdered. Some people who were enslaved, but they make sure they show the picture. They make sure they show the picture of who those some people are. So even though they don't come out and say it to themselves, they say, hey, look. Jackie says we can bring out the best in others. True understanding is needed. Yes. I spend a lot of my time lately, and I thank God that I have the opportunity to do that weekly and teaching history. And teaching history. You know, I'm going to call people out. I've asked several people. There's only one person that I told I did not want to come on the show yet because I wanted to do right by that person. But I asked people to come on Erudition. I've asked. I have done it for a reason. Different individuals from different walks of life, white, black, whatever. And it's not that they don't want to come on. It's just that I don't think that the importance of what we're dealing with has penetrated, permeated, have hit people yet. We're in a fight, ladies and gentlemen, for history. We're in a fight. We've been in a fight for quite some time, but we are right now in the heat of it. See, a lot of these books are written and put out by revisionists. We've known that for the better part of 50-something years. And we've been taught revisionist history if we go back and we look at it. And so now, well, we have new historians and academics who are saying, hey, wait a minute. We're done with that. Now they're politically and legally getting involved to say, stop, nope. We do not want you teaching people about this history. We do not want you telling folks that we have treated them differently. And what are some of the results of that? What are some of the results of that? We're seeing it in our society. People that don't know who they are have no hope of what they could ever be. You don't even think about it. I don't know who I am. My daddy was a thug. He was a criminal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a criminal just like him, because that's what's expected. But if you knew that your great grandfather was an inventor, or you knew that your great grandmother had done some miraculous things and saving and feeding and helping 10 to 15 children, or if you knew that one of your relatives helped to put astronauts into space, if you knew that, Malcolm X said that some of the most genius minds are trapped in the ghetto. And that is the truth. You're trapped. You can't even get out the ghetto because the people, every time you try to crawl out, they smack you back down. That is an internalized lie that we tell ourselves. My mother said, that's why you have to learn your history. So important. Many are just uneducated, just living and dealing with the abuse that knows we don't deserve. Yeah, they know they don't deserve. We know that. We know that. My son said we would have something to live up to. Preach. My grandfather was a hard-working man. When I came into my adulthood and I went out all over the world, I always thought about my granddad. People will ask me, hey, man, how you working 48, 72 hours? I always thought about my grandfather. I'm going to work until the job is done because this is important. I ain't the only one. I ain't special. But the reality of it is I had that inspiration. I had that example. Jackie said, we must learn to teach our heritage in our genuine form, unapologetically. We have to learn how to research. You're saying something right there. I have really been thinking lately that I need to do maybe a masterclass on research. On research. How to learn. Because a lot of us just don't know how. It reminds me of the book of Pimp, Iceberg Slim. Yes. And a lot of people never got the real message from that, Teddy, of what that book is about. What he's trying to really teach you is how you being hustled. Tyson said, handcuffed in the back of a car, 1.5 to 2 hours for backing into a parking space. They said, we don't have anything on you but your California plates. So we're going to see if they want you for anything. Yeah. You guilty just by. But they tell us that this systemic thing doesn't happen. I truly believe if we all knew our history, we could treat each other better. True, Phil. And we need to be teaching that history. What would make our children feel empowered? I often, my sons probably will tell you, Kendra, me and my wife, I can't just take credit by myself. I stress to my sons, every time that they take a lesson, it's pain. I make sure that I try to help them. I give them life lessons. One of the things I told them, I think that they were 5 or 6 years old, and I told them, a man, don't ever leave out of the house without any ID, without any information on who you are and where you are, especially a black man. It's little lessons. I told them about the people that they were related to. I told them about how their lives are impacted by our history. I went through and made sure that they knew stories about how we were treated, why we were treated that way. I made sure that they understood not to hate white people, even in their racism, but to identify it. Because I remember being told as a child, you never know when a racist white man's mind is set on murder. It was a deep, powerful thing to me, because I've experienced things in my life where I was like, whoa, that's crazy. But it's true. You never know when anybody's mind is set on murder. But when it's a racial mentality, my only blood brother, had a gun, a rifle pulled on him the other day, him and his wife, during Juneteenth. You never know when they're set on murder. And we're seeing that with Ahmaud Arbery. Just, you're jogging in the neighborhood, people walking into folks' houses, blowing them away. So how do we empower them? We educate them. We educate them truthfully, honestly. We invest our time. We invest in mentorship. If we don't know, then we find somebody that can help, and then we all learn together. Whenever I do this show, that's one of the taglines I always say with this show: let's learn together. Let's learn together. I'm here to help any way I can, because knowledge in Eddie's head don't benefit nobody if Eddie don't share it. And I teach my kids the same thing. We learn together. We investigate together. Sit down as a family, just like you pray together, study together. Find a subject, find a person, and say, hey, let's learn about this person. Let's figure this out. Oh, who were they? What did they do? Somebody out of your circular thinking, though. Not the Dr. Kings, not the Rosa Parks. Those are great people. But go further out. Who are the Fred Shuttlesworths? The Ralph Abernathy's? Right? Who are these people who worked around the peripheral that none of this could be done if they were not involved? Right? Who helped them? Who provided? Who assisted? And once we do that, I think we'll be better. I think we'll be better as a culture. Phil said that Iceberg Slim is a good, yes. Pimp is such a good read. And I remember telling a young man years ago that he needs to get that book. And he was like, well, you telling me to get a book about, man, as educated as you are, man, you telling me to get a book about a pimp? I said, you need to read that, especially as a Black man. Because what we learn in that book is a lot of the problems that are heavy in our society, that are pushing our young men to thuggery, that are pushing our young women to debauchery. We can read that. And that was his purpose. It wasn't his purpose to make you a pimp. His purpose was to educate you to not fall into that line of thought. And if we could just learn from our ancestors, they lived this life for a reason. We are all, those who are Christians, we say, well, God, all things work together for good. God is providing us with lessons and knowledge. But it's us that decide, I'm not going to go and do anything to increase my knowledge. This episode was supposed to talk specifically about critical race theory. But critical race theory, as I told you, I don't like the theory. It's so much deeper than that. And we need to be able to understand that. And I think we're going to devote a little bit more time over the next couple of weeks, not maybe every episode, but we're going to delve into some of those issues of critical race theory. We're going to delve into why we need to know this as we go and further into our history. Like you said, it was to educate, don't judge the book, but yes. But so often we do judge it by its cover, Jackie. We don't understand that was a reason, a purpose. Sean Anthony, Black people don't become the stereotype that racists portray them as. Instead, we stay true to ourselves, being tactful, caring, and always learning in order to stay alive. Sometimes my sons, it's so refreshing to me when I read that, because a father or a mother's job is to prepare. To prepare. We can't be with them forever. And I worry about our young people. And when my son says being tactful and always learning in order to stay alive, ladies and gentlemen, there's some truth to that. If we're not teaching our kids how to be tactful, how to be caring, how to be wise, how to understand, then in many ways we're going to fail them. And that means teaching them our history, no matter how painful that it is. Mother said, see, a lot of people are just followers, and the only history some know is what some elder might have shared trying to learn in school to somebody was born. A lot of our culture don't even read, nor do they understand. The information they gave in the textbooks was not teaching anything. Once you get a hunger, you learn it. It's never too late to learn. No, Mama, thank you. And that's from a woman. My mother may not remember. My mother bought me a series of books one time. It was for my birthday. It had Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, all these classics, right? And I was so just like amazed. She bought that for me. And I read through each one of those books. And I didn't know then what I know now, that that idea of learning, because even in those literary novels, you learn something about history, the workshops in England, the white slavery, as they called it. So when white people tell you that they didn't understand what it meant to work and not be able to eat, there's a reason why they outlawed slavery in England so early. But my mother made sure that I had that information. She made sure, and I will be forever thankful for that, because that's why I can do what I do and what I've done in my life. My son said they have to be trained outside of school of hard knocks. Often I hear people say, I was not raised that way. However, when you know better, you're supposed to do better. You can learn from any school. Many times our young people in our community, they fall into learning. If you're not interested in school, and I'm going to tie in what my mother said and what my son said. If you're not interested in school, there's always some other school to learn from. When you cut in school and you not in school, there's always some thugs who are going to teach you how to do something. There's always an opening to learn something else. Everybody that you see on the bad side of doing things started off as a child just like you did, innocent and oblivious, until somebody taught them something nefarious. It's just the truth. And so we have to be wise enough to understand what we are going to teach our children. And if we can't do it, I had a friend, Mr. Brown, said one time, if we can't do it, send them to somebody who they can. If you ain't going to be worth nothing and you are okay with that, that's a decision that you have made. Don't push that child to do that. Don't put them in that situation that you yourself didn't want. And don't be jealous of them if they succeed. Because if they're succeeding, it's because you decided to make a decision not to let them fail. Do you have a part in that? Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming down to the end of our hour. And I know this was probably not the history session that you used to. And maybe you think, man, but we did cover some history today. We did talk about some things. But I wanted us to understand this thing that we're seeing in the news about critical race theory. I wanted us to understand how we are going into a circular mentality again. in which we are allowing rich people and people of power to decide what our kids are going to learn. But what they learn in our homes, that is on us. We decide that. When Julius Rosenwald, who was the owner of Sears Roebuck, he financed Tuskegee for Booker T. Washington. It seemed like a great thing. He helped him build schools. He did all of this. And as we said, Washington really wanted Black folks to just get along. And when Booker T. Washington died in 1915, Rosenwald still kept the promise and helped build schools. And many people say, well, that's great. But Rosenwald was also the guy who initiated the syphilis studies in Tuskegee. See, we got to understand. We can think we're getting along. Booker T. Washington long dead. But there is a sacrifice that's going to happen. And we got to be better. We got to be wiser. The last thing about Booker, I don't want you to think Booker T. Washington. I want you to read Up From Slavery. Read Booker T. Washington's book. The man lived a life that was very, very iconic. And at the same time, he actually put money into Black programs and created schools that are still here today. But to get along and not teach and not understand method will not work, ladies and gentlemen. Booker T. Washington was beat almost to death 2 years before he died because he happened to be a Black man in a white area, and white men tried to beat him to death before they knew who he was. And then he took out an ad in the newspaper and apologized for those white men, almost killing him. And some will say that that contributed to his early death. It don't matter how you get along if you're not being honest with the gifts and the things that God has given you and provided for you to be able to provide for your children and your progeny and those who are within your mentorship. We really enjoy you coming on and help and all of you who came on to ask questions on Erudition today. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. Those of you who have shared our things on Facebook, please, if you only get a YouTube account simply to support some of these Black shows like the Man Up Show, like Erudition, please do that. Your assistance, your help helps us to reach more people, to provide that mentorship and guidance to these folks out here we're just talking about. I'm going to be on here as long as God allows me to be on here teaching. And I thank you all. I thank you. In closing, I'm going to say that next week, we're going to be on again on Thursday. I plan on having a guest on next week. We'll see if that goes through. I keep telling people, don't be intimidated. Just come on. I don't know why people don't want to spend time with me. I'm a pretty nice person, but we will see you all next week. Thank you. Y'all got my mother on here asking questions or providing some statements. Hey, I'm so happy to see all of you all on here. I love you all. Have a great and wonderful weekend, and we will see you next week. And with that, I think I'm going to sign out of here. Peace out, everybody.